All right, next step. We haven't talked about this part yet. Now we are going to set up the load balancer. And what a load balancer does, and I would highly recommend reading into, some of the links that I've got available for you. Basically, you are creating a central point of entry to some server configuration. Typically, this would be like a web server type of thing where you go to a web domain. So, I don't know, google.com, gvsu.edu, whatever you want to consider a common name. And based on how busy those servers are, you'll get routed to one particular server. And keep in mind with any web application, you need a server hosting that material, right? It's not just some nebulous entity, even if we want to think that it is. So we might be routed to US East 1, or we might be routed to US Central. We could be routed to Asia East. Depends on multiple factors, depends on how you've configured everything. Is it going to be based on your geographic location? It's going to be based on how busy the servers are, the server load, performance, lots of metrics we could look at here. But the load balancer, effectively, it's a nice little service layer on top of a web application, and they're pretty easy to get up and running. Super easy here because we're just literally copy and pasting shell commands. First thing we need is a health check. So this is going to run over port 80. And what we're going to do here is keep an eye on our servers. Now, a health check can mean multiple things. Typically, is the server responsive, meaning is it alive or not? Does it need to be rebooted? Is it running really slowly? Now, there's lots of kind of key performance metrics that you can go in and configure. We're going to use the defaults here because we're doing basic, is this responsive or not? So we're going to create a health check. We'll create our backend service, which is our HTTP protocol, basic health check, or HTTP basic check. Again, abstracted nicely for a shell command for us. And once that is done, we're going to add it to our instance group. So that thing that we created before. Again, these are all gcloud compute commands that we're running. Seems like a lot. If you go into cloud development, you probably have a checklist of these that you would run, or you would create some kind of a pre-baked script that you would always run anytime you wanted to do this. So we have added them. Now we need to do an URL map, which basically is going to route any request to this particular configuration. So we're going to create a web map. And what are we pointing it at? Our backend service, what we've named it here. Again, these are a lot of commands to copy and paste in a row and try to figure out what they're doing. Again, this link I would highly recommend you read through as you follow along here because it is helpful to kind of understand the flow. If you were to do this manually, you would install a load balancing service. You would go into configuration files and set all the ports, set all the IPs. You get a much better appreciation for what's going on behind the scenes here and what a nice level of abstraction you're getting with these very, very simple commands. But these are easier to run, right? And it's easier to let Google manage them. So what did we run last? Create the map. So, okay, so this is the one we did before. Now we're going to create a proxy to route them to our map. And then after that, we need a forwarding rule. So skipping over all the basic networking stuff that hopefully you've gotten in undergrad classes, basically we're just going to proxy addresses into our load balancer so that this thing knows how to understand requests, how to receive them and transmit them. Proxying at a very, very high level. And it will be over port 80 with IP4. So we can be very clear with our load balancer what to expect traffic-wise. So once we have that, we should be able to see things up and running. Right, so that is all good, no errors. Good, good, good. In the link here, we get a link to our load balancing page. So there is literally a cloud service for load balancing. We could have done all of this manually with the GUI. We use the Cloud Shell because we're applications developers. We like having scripting level service. So here we see load balancer. Again, we could have created it and done all this by hand, but here's our map. And we should see, okay, good. One thing to keep an eye on is that if you don't have, in our case, we said there are 2 servers, we should see 2 out of 2 up and running and healthy. If this field here was empty that I'm kind of highlighting, your service would not be accessible. But if we take a quick peek at this before we move on to the demo, okay, there's the name of our instance group, here's the zone it lives in, here's how many servers are up and running. If one of them went down, we would see this go down. We have not configured auto scaling or balancing or capacity. We see we have a basic health check set up here. And if we click that, basically we get a little bit more detail. So if we see a 5-second timeout on our server, then something's probably wrong. And you can go in and tweak this to your little heart's desire. But pretty, again, really easy, especially coming from somebody who used to teach this as a manual process. So now let's refresh. Okay, this is fine. It is still getting up and running, but we have a different error, which is good. Traffic is trying to be routed here. I refresh it again. Now we see this is part of our startup script that we shipped to one of the first commands we ran, page served from. If we scroll all the way back in our little demo here, almost all the way back. So we have our, where'd we go? Our startup script right here. Here is our echo page served from VM hostname. How do we get the VM hostname? Well, we are curling some information about our server. So pretty straightforward. And if I refresh this a few times, we will see the different VMs taking over. One thing you could do if you wanted to get frisky with this, you could set up one of those like load balancing attack type scripts. There's Bombardier is actually a Google Go script. There is an Apache load balancing tester. Effectively, what you're doing is you're spawning a whole lot of traffic and seeing if your load balancer can handle it or not. So definitely a neat little project to play with, especially if you've never done load balancing. I just want to try something really quickly here, going a little bit off script, but that is fine, especially since I'm sure as you're already aware, I don't have a script for this. Going based on general teaching knowledge. So here we have our virtual machines. I went to my compute engine and we actually see the names of them. I'm gonna go ahead and stop one. And I don't seem to have the rights to stop it. Okay. Can I SSH into it? Again, I'm just kind of playing around here to see. I'm going to guess that because it is managed that I won't have access to dink around with this stuff. But I always like to try to break things to show you, at least I do have access. If I do sudo shutdown -h now, and I'm going to actually skip back over to my load balancing page. I haven't run the command yet. I want to watch. So we see 2 out of 2. I shut down. So this is 6MF1. One of 2 things is going to, or one of 3 things is going to happen. The first one is that this just doesn't work because I don't have sudo access, but because it went ahead and allowed me to run the command, that should be fine. If can I refresh this page? One out of 1, look at that. And now if I refresh this should always come from VRPV. So I'm just refreshing multiple times. Good, good, good. That actually worked. Mildly surprised. But what we're seeing in this particular instance, and the only thing I wonder is if it's going to spin it back up or not. I haven't configured any recovery, so I'm just kind of curious. No, it's still down. Okay, good. Well, bit of a fun little aside there. At least I found it a little bit of a fun aside. Compute engine. It is up though. Okay, so it does recover. Interesting. Good to know. I didn't add that in intentionally. That's why I was just kind of seeing what it was doing. And honestly, I would highly encourage you all to play around with this kind of thing too. Try to break things, try to see what you can do with this, because then you will get a feel for what the boundaries are of what your system can do. And it being in a cloud environment, everything is effectively re-instantiable. It's kind of where your sandbox or your playground to break things before you put it into production, right? Anyway, bit of an aside and a diversion. Hope you all had fun. I definitely did. I like playing with load balancers. So I will see you in the next video. Bye, everybody. And don't forget to delete your project when you're done. And make sure there's nothing else on there that you don't want to get rid of. I will be deleting this right now. Bye, everybody.